All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at Fort Oak Cliff for our monthly voter education forum. My name is Casey Thomas, and I'm founder of Our Vote is Our Voice, and we're excited to have our special guest with us.
Yes.
Many of you watch her like I do every Sunday as she gives her point of view as relates to local and statewide politics. So it is my honor and pleasure to present to us. We'll be doing a fireside chat discussion this evening. Ms. Berna Dean Steptoe. Let's give her a round of applause.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us for this important and timely conversation. For those who don't know, we do this every month, every third Wednesday. We do a voter education forum right here at Fort Oak Cliff in 75216, which is a zip code that has historically had some of the most challenges. And so Fort Oak Cliff is a community-based organization that's designed specifically called the Super Block to focus on 75216 and to provide services to the community and this beautiful, beautiful building. Wish y'all were here with us with this beautiful facility. My mentee, Mr. Taylor Torrance, is the founder and executive director, and his team does such a great job. So at this time, I'm going to read the bio of our special guest. Berna Dean Steptoe is a senior political producer and political analyst at WFAA Channel 8 in Dallas, Texas. She produces and is a regular contributor to Inside Texas Politics, a weekly political show that airs statewide. I've had the privilege of being on Inside Texas Politics several times. She writes for WFAA.com and also is an Emmy-nominated political TV producer. In 2019, Inside Texas Politics was part of WFAA's National Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Television Political Journalism. Berna Dean accepted the award at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. She is also a member of WFAA's political team and offers in-depth analysis for the station's political digital show, which aired most recently during the 2024 Texas primary election. During her 30-year career at WFAA, Berna Dean has held a variety of positions. She started in the Community Relations Department as a liaison between WFAA and the minority community, and later moved into the news department as a special projects coordinator. It was in that position that she developed the station's popular Weather Minds program. The Weather Minds team of WFAA meteorologists visit North Texas schools and teach children the math and science of forecasting weather. Before WFAA, Berna Dean was an editorial columnist for the Dallas Examiner, where she covered politics, government, and community issues. She was also a business owner. As principal of Steptoe Advertising and Progressive Consultants, Berna Dean managed many successful political campaigns in Dallas County. Her clients included both Democratic and Republican candidates. One of her passions is collecting art. She also enjoys public speaking and sits on several boards. To give back to her alma mater, Berna Dean is an active member of the Dallas chapter of the Houston-Tillotson International Alumni Association, HBCU, having held many leadership positions, including board president and recording secretary. She now chairs the chapter scholarship committee. Berna Dean is an active member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. But what gives her the greatest joy is spending time with her daughter and grandson. So we are honored to have you, and we're going to be inviting to our conversation. A little bit about Our Vote is Our Voice. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization we founded during the pandemic as a way to encourage people to get out and vote and make sure that the pandemic didn't prevent individuals. And so over the past 4 years, Our Vote is Our Voice has held candidate forums, political forums, done a lot of GOTV activities, phone banking, door knocking, to make sure in our community we encourage everyone to get out and vote. And on Thursday, free advertisement, at New Hope Baptist Church, we'll be hosting a candidate forum. And so it starts at
7 p.m.
7 p.m. So we encourage everyone to come out tomorrow night to hear the candidates. I know we have candidates for sheriff, we have candidates for Dallas ISD School Board District 9, as well as Dallas College District 7, I believe. So,
All of them.
okay, and all,
Everyone.
excellent, all the
Everyone that
candidates
has
has been invited.
competition, right.
So, we are really, really excited about having the opportunity for people to come out and get informed. So we'll jump right in. So, let's talk about the March primary. Were there any surprises in the primary elections that you saw?
Well, you know what, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share with you my thoughts on politics in general, because I have found that in our communities, we don't talk enough about it. And I have found also that in certain situations, we're not aware of how important politics is in our daily lives. But in terms of the March primary, quite frankly, locally, what surprised me was the sheriff's race. We did not think that Sheriff Brown would get into a runoff. So that was a surprising local election. And then statewide, the most shocking one was the Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan, when he went into a runoff. And that is a crucial election, because the Republican Party, which it controls practically everything, but it is in an intra-party fight. And and quite frankly, I could care less about him as a politician or him as a Republican or Democrat for that matter, but he is a Republican. But if the Republican Party is going so far to the right, and if you look at some of its policies, especially for me as an African American, and as a woman as well, it frightens me to watch some of the policies. But one thing that Dave Phelan does is he tries to keep it more centrist right. And if the most powerful position in the state of Texas, if they are allowed or he is defeated, what does that say? But anyway, those were the two most surprising for me, was Dave Phelan and Sheriff Brown.
So, let's elaborate on something, because it's a great opportunity to educate people, because a lot of individuals, a lot of people don't really understand how state government works, let alone local government. But you talked about Dave Phelan, Speaker of the House. What are some of the responsibilities that come with being Speaker of the House, and why is it important to have someone in that position who's going to be more driven by policy that's going to be good for Texas, as opposed to a far right, in this case, partisan perspective?
Well, one thing, he sets the agenda. He appoints all the chair people, and that's what has him in trouble at this point now, is because which has been done forever, where he has appointed Democrats as chairpersons. And now the Republican Party, the activists primarily, and they are primary voters, are saying that they don't want any more Democratic chairpeople. And I'm not saying that every Democratic chairperson will probably not vote according to what Dave Phelan would want, or push that agenda, but at least you have a bipartisan group of people. And he, at this point, he is committed to a bipartisan form of chairmanship. And if he does not win, that's going away. And if he does win, you just won't see as many. But I think that he could be somewhat committed, because the one thing that the speaker, the entire House votes for the speaker. And typically, it takes, because the Republican Party has been so divided in its philosophy, that it takes Democratic support usually to get a speakership.
Wow.
And so now, if the question also, and I talk about that speaker's race, because at this point, it is the last example of any kind of partisanship in the state of Texas. Because, and our governor is so powerful, because one thing with this voucher, and I hope that all of you, and even your audience, watch that fight. Because, and as I always say, the Republican Party is fantastic in terms of messaging. And if we think that the public schools and public education will continue to get even a small amount more of what it's getting, then I don't think you've watched state politics. But at this point, the Republican Party, and I say Republican Party only because that's the party that's pushing the voucher system, where your tax dollars will go into helping to support private school students. And if you look at where Texas sits in terms of funding public schools, it's almost at the bottom. So where are you going to get the money? Once public education and the voucher fight comes out of the headlines, and it will, then where are the schools going? Where will the state get the money? Or where the state lawmakers are willing to get the money to put into public schools? So it's a crucial fight. And your lieutenant governor is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. So powerful. I mean, you don't even have bipartisanship in the Senate. But you do have somewhat in the House, and that's only because the leadership is committed to sharing some of that power only where it's not as important to the Republican base. Because keep in mind, the small things that are passing on bipartisanship levels, they're not things that the Republican base doesn't want. So I hope I've answered you in terms
absolutely.
of that state rep. I mean the state house, because it's very interesting. But I think that everyone should watch what's going down and pay close attention to this runoff election. That's in May the 28th.
Yeah, right.
Because one thing with this voucher fight, the governor promised, say if my program doesn't pass, he targeted all those who voted against it, and most of them have lost. And then I think you have 4 who now, they're in runoffs, for the May 28th runoffs. And keep in mind that they are far right. Far right. And I'm not, you have some Democrats who are far left with the progressive, they're called progressives now. So, but I'm just saying as far as Dallas politics is more Democratic. But as far as the state is totally controlled by far right Republicans.
Right. Wow. Wow. So, something that was really highlighted during the last legislative session was 3 letters called DEI. And ironically, a lot of people who pushed the bans in the law, SB 17, could not tell you what DEI means. They may be able to tell you, may not even be able to tell you what it stands for. So I was really, and I guess I was gullible about this. I just did not foresee the possibility of them ending diversity, equity, inclusion programs on colleges, public college and universities. But it happened. So tell me, what were your thoughts? Did you foresee that the ban, that it would pass the way it did? Did you think that maybe it would be some type of compromise? Talk to me about your thoughts about SB 17.
I was not, and as I say, a lot of things I look at from a perspective, from a African-American perspective, because I'm not gonna change that. And from a female. I wasn't surprised because keep in mind, this started years ago. And it really started when the lieutenant governor partnered with, I think it was University of Texas System. And that was to create this conservative think tank. So that was probably about maybe 4 years ago. So, and then when the narratives of hiring or getting students into schools according to merit, that was another messaging that the Republicans were doing. But now, and let me tell you what's discouraged. Because when we see these things happening, you don't hear a loud enough voice. Because when they hired, and I cannot think of her name, she was African American, who they hired at UT, and then the trustees were up in arms because they claimed that she was teaching DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and she wasn't. Number one, you don't even teach that anyway. So she quit. They rescinded the contract. So it's been happening. Then look at the book ban. And North Texas state representative is the one who started that. So to get to this point, but it's going to get worse. And it was so interesting. The University of North Texas. I worked with one of the professors who teach politics there. And she has been very good in terms of coming on the show. And so the idea was, okay, what about engaging some of the students that you teach? But the school had become so apprehensive in terms of it appearing as if they were either more political or into this DEI efforts that they couldn't do it. They didn't do it.
Wow.
They did not participate, which would have been an excellent opportunity for students. So I'm just telling you, telling your audience, it's going to get worse. And as I said on the show one Sunday, it's never been about merits. Because keep in mind, they tap the top 10%.
Right.
Of the students at these high schools. So they're the smartest, the brightest of those campuses. So to say that they need to start looking at the merits in terms of bringing two students into schools, you're getting the top of the schools anyway. It was on what the DEI programs were doing was leveling the playing field. They were saying, okay, you know, that what's the heritage system where your kids are allowed into schools? So they had the first. And so no, it was never about merits. But that's the message. And that's what they say now. And as I said on Inside Texas Politics, it's never been about merit.
Right.
So anyway, you know I can go on.
No. I was watching in your comments, you were moving into that direction on Sunday and it ran out of time. So I'm glad you were able to finish that thought. Because when you spoke about merit and you talked about the top 10%, I said, well, when we look at what's happening across our public schools with the top 10% and our public schools in general, then we're seeing a more browning, of our public schools. And if you're talking about 10%, the top 10%, well, you're taking the top 10% of schools that are browner. And those individuals are going to qualify academically when you talk about merit. So the real issue is not, as you said,
It's not
merit.
merits.
The real issue is the ethnicity of those individuals who have shown that they meet that standard in terms of merit. And so, and you said it's gonna get worse, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Because what I'm hearing, and I wanna see if you're hearing the same thing, is they wanna expand it beyond, admissions and diversity and equity inclusion, and they wanna go as far as looking at government set-asides and things of that nature. So, tell me if you're hearing that, and then if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, because we've gotta raise the red flag. We gotta put the warning sign out of what's coming.
Well, government contracts, that has been looked at for a while as well. In terms of minority representation, and because they don't want those kinds of set-asides. So, but think about the rights period. And I was on my way over here. I was listening to the radio in terms of they're trying to make protesting a felony because what you have, they're trying to say that if you get out and protest against us, then we're going to arrest you and send you to jail, and it's a felony. And once you get a felony, what can you not do?
Vote.
Thank you. And we had Rodney Ellis, who's a commissioner of Houston County Commission, and he was on the show. And one of the things he said, and it's so true, because most of the efforts, the anti-voting, the efforts where they're trying to stifle your vote and suppress your vote, they target Houston. And they target Houston because Houston is the large. I didn't even realize that it's larger than number of states.
Wow.
And how do the voters in Houston vote?
Democratic.
Primarily Democrat. Now, once you get outside of Houston, you might get some of your predominantly Republican counties, but they vote Democrat. And on certain given days, who make up those votes?
People of color.
Is in the suppression of our voting rights, it's alarming. It is alarming. And I want to point this out too in terms of, when they purge those voting lists. I was talking to one of my Sigma brothers, and I've got to bring up you all talk about the deltas and the alphas, but and he went to vote in the primary, and he had voted in this precinct for about 10 years, and they told him that he wasn't on the roster.
Wow.
And he remembered that he had received something in the mail that he was told to go and register, and he ignored it because he's like, I've been voting there for 10 years. Well, they purged him off the voting. So I want to encourage you, if you get a card, and I received one from the Secretary of State, which is so confusing because it says if you're applying for a new voter registration, if you're doing, and I didn't qualify for any of them, but why did I get it? But I'm going to call and do something because they're purging your names. And that's another form of suppression. But and when I say it's going to get worse, because you have coming into power, certain lawmakers who are just ultra conservative. And that's just another name for certain lawmakers who want to take away rights from certain people.
Wow.
It's becoming even more conservative. I was if you all were listening to what was going on in the House and the Senate today, where they voted down an impeachment of a.
Yeah.
Well, but keep in mind, this is a secretary who's doing his job,
Right.
and anyway. But one of the commentators was saying that that most of the lawmakers are extremists. So because they're saying, well, okay, you have a party that's getting more extremist. Well, the lawmakers are extremists. That's who they're voting on to send to your House and Senate or whatever. And I want to say this too. The Democrats, well, the Republicans are making the headlines. But you have some of the same extremists in the Democratic Party. They're just not making headlines. They're only in control, well, they control the Senate and the White House. But they're not in the headlines. The Republicans are in the headlines, but in the Democratic Party, you have just as much extremism. We just don't hear as much about it. You need to watch more of your cable TV.
We talked a little bit at the beginning about the March primary, and fortunately, we have a newly elected in the primary in the room, State Rep-elect Aisha Davis, who's with us, who's a member of Zeta Phi Beta, will be the first elected Zeta in the State House. So thank you for your service and congratulations, and thank you for being here. But she's currently on the State Board of Education and just got back last week. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but after successfully passing the African American history course during her first term in office, she and several of her colleagues have been working on a Native American studies course for years. However, recently, the chair changed. And oftentimes when the chair changes, because we know who appoints the chair of the State Board of Education, then the priorities change. And so after several years of working on this, he says that he's not going to put this on the agenda. And so the challenge is not just with the Native American history course, because all of this goes back to something else. We talked about DEI, now I'm going to talk about 3 other initials, CRT. Anything and everything has been thrown under this heading of CRT. And what we're seeing now, because in 2025, if I'm not correct, Rep-elect Davis, they're going to review the social studies standards. So now that you had SB 3, which is law, which is the anti-critical race theory bill, now as they begin to look at social studies standards, there's going to be a push to water down some of these standards in terms of ethnic studies courses. So what are your thoughts on that? And what would you say that the community, our community, should be aware of as relates to upcoming, I don't know if we use the tax, but rollbacks? How about that? The rollback of the progress that has taken place as far as relates to ethnic studies course and things of that nature.
The continued rollback. You know, as I say, these things have been happening. What's happening is they're progressing, and redistricting is what hurt us. Because what the party in control did was they redrew these lines to guarantee incumbency, which primarily are those who are against what we do and who we are. Now, as far as what listeners and voters can do, go vote.
Right.
Because, and also, keep in contact with your elected official. Because if they don't, they react and respond to those who they hear from.
Say that again. That was good. That was good.
They
for
react
the
and
camera.
respond.
Say that again.
And what's this old saying about the squeaky wheel?
The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yep.
And if we, number one, we need to vote. I remember talking to an elected official who said, you know what, I'd love to do more. My people don't vote.
Wow.
So how can we go in there and fight for something when we don't have the numbers? So that's the first thing is you need to vote. You need to know who you're voting for.
Right.
You need to know if that person has your best interest, and you need to know what your interest is so that you're not voting against your best interest.
Right.
Amen.
Okay, number one, go vote. Number two, find out who your elected official is and stay in contact. Attend these town halls that they have. Ensure that they are having town halls or that they are reaching out and that you see your elected official. And I want to talk about, go back to the state board. You know, you don't even, I probably didn't know who my state board representative was until I got involved in the politics so much. Keep in mind too that they wanted to change the whole narrative of slavery.
Yep.
This is the Texas
Voluntary
State Board.
servitude.
And wanted to say that the slaves were happy, at least they had a job. At least they learned skills. Now this kind of narrative and language came from your representatives, because if you didn't vote for them and you live in a district, they represent you.
Right.
Now how responsive they are to you determines on how responsive you are to that elected official.
Right.
But it amazes me. And I'm gonna tell you something else. So you all have me on a roll.
Oh, yeah.
But
Go
suppressive language. And I'll tell you something that has worked very, very well on African Americans. And that's the notion that your vote doesn't count.
Wow.
Right.
That is a suppressive form of language that we have bought into, because I still hear it. Well, why would I vote? My vote doesn't count. Well, if you do your homework, you will find a number of election officials who have won by one vote.
That's right.
But that's a form of suppression. And I don't want to say oppression, because there's a whole lot of things in oppression.
Right.
But it suppresses your will to vote. And we buy into it. I am still hearing it from young and old. And then also, well, I only vote during the presidential election. Well, you know who controls your water and how much water you pay? Your local elected officials.
That's right.
And we have council people who have won a council seat over thousands of people, won with 300 votes.
Yep.
Right.
Sad.
So you gotta vote. You must vote and stay aware. You know, remain aware. Listen to and listen to more than one news outlet.
Right.
And read more than one news outlet. Because you must be able to absorb what you hear and determine what's right for you. But anyway.
Oh,
can I
no.
answer that?
Yes. You absolutely did. You absolutely did.
Oh my goodness gracious, it's just, that's why I like these kinds of forums. And I do appreciate the invitation.
We'll invite you
am-
back again.
Well, and I am
yes.
accepting more. I am accepting more because we need the information, and we need to know what's going on in our communities. Because if you can't, those of us who, number one, you're going to pay a whole lot of money for transportation anyway. But if we can't get a bus in our neighborhood, why? Look at your leaders, your lawmakers. You pay taxes.
Right.
It's just, I love what I do, but sometimes it just amazes me.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. So, we know here in the Dallas Metroplex, we have several elections. We had a March primary. We're having a municipal election. We've got an open school board seat, open Dallas College trustee seat, and we've got a bond election here in Dallas. But then we know in our suburb areas, they have mayoral elections, they have city council, and then there is at least one, and maybe others, depending upon what side of the political fence you're on, a primary where you're gonna have runoff. elections. In my opinion, this gives us an opportunity to really flex our political muscle, because we're not just voting once, we're voting potentially 3 times before the November general election. And so, as someone who's an avid, not just voter, but an advocate for voting, tell us, how is it that, and why is it, or what way do we encourage individuals to not only vote in the primary, but to vote, as you talked about, in those local elections? How do we help them to understand that local elections matter?
Education.
Okay.
And communicating and talking to prospective voters or voters in their language
Yes.
and how they communicate. Because if you tell my daughter that she needs to go protest or either she needs to go vote to protect her rights and all that, well, she'll probably say, well, Mom, I have some rights. How are they going to take away my rights? And then I had a young lady once tell me, I asked her, I said, why don't you watch Inside Texas Politics? She said, well, how do I watch? She said, but I don't watch TV. So we need to make sure that we're communicating them on their platform, we're educating them, we're speaking to them, what I say about messaging, and let them understand how that vote matters to them and their life, their livelihood. You mentioned that bond election, because we don't pay attention to bond elections, and they're crucial because they dictate, bond elections dictate how our taxpayer dollars are spent. So even if we vote for it or against it, at least we are participating. We need to participate. But I think that there's not enough education. And I know that a number of these organizations will probably say, well, we do. But you need to look at the results. If you're doing an avid campaign on education, vote education, and it's not enough to register voters. You've got to get them to the polls.
You gotta educate them and get them there.
You must get them to the polls. And before we leave, though, I want to talk about, I want to jump to that in November,
Sure.
once I have an opportunity.
That was next. That was next.
But vote
Very good.
education is crucial.
Yeah.
But you must register them, but you must get them to the polls, and you must communicate to them, not only on their level, on how they gather information, but talk to them in their language. We just had a poll. We'll talk about it on Inside Texas Politics this Sunday.
All right, a little sneak
But
preview.
I think that that election is going to be paramount. And you remember, and I don't want to appear as if I'm for either party, because to me it doesn't matter. You educate on both. But the Democrats, and this is an African American, only have one opportunity, and that's the U.S. Senate. They only have one opportunity now, and that's with Colin Aldrich. We just the Texas Hispanic. I wrote it down because I just got it today. The Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation just released a poll.
Okay.
And it shows that that Senator Ted Cruz and Colin Aldrich is just 5 points.
Wow. This early.
This early.
Wow.
And Colin Aldrich has raised more money than Beto O'Rourke did at this time in Beto O'Rourke's campaign.
Wow.
I spoke to a Democratic Party organization not too long ago, and I was asked, okay, what's our most important race? And I said the U.S. Senate race in terms of statewide,
Right.
because people of color, and I'm thinking it before I say this, they don't have a lot of statewide representation.
Right.
So if a shot now is going to be Colin Aldrich and only because he could raise the money.
Mhm.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And let me look at my notes, my numbers, because when I brought
Take
these
your time.
numbers out, they told me I was not correct.
Mm.
Okay, in March, Colin Aldred, he only got 569,500 votes. He didn't even get 1 million votes. He got a little over 500,000. You know what Cruz got?
What do you get?
Almost 2 million.
Mm.
So, and then in terms of his party, they didn't even get, Biden didn't get 1 million.
Hmm.
And former President Trump received almost 3
Wow.
million. So in order to elect, and it's going to be a long time before the opportunity comes up,
Mhm.
to elect an African-American senator from the state of Texas, Aldred might be your best bet, but he has a long road to go.
Yeah.
But this is looking at turnout.
Mhm. That's important. That's really
This
important.
is looking at turnout for you. They didn't even get 1 million votes.
Mm.
Okay, I think we're running out of time though. So I'm going to be quiet, but I just wanted to bring up how crucial it is in November.
Yeah, no, we're fine. We're fine. We're here at least to 8. So that's an excellent, excellent point. You know, I think voter registration numbers, and I'm hearing more discussion about the disparity when you talk about the parties in terms of those that are registered, is wide. However, there is time to make up the deficit. As you talked about November and how much is at stake. You have people, and you talked about this, those who only vote during presidential elections. Well, you've got some people saying that one is too old and one is too crooked. So my choices, I don't have good choices in this. So, you know what? I think I'm just gonna sit this one out and wait till, 4 years from now and see if we can get some better candidates. What's the danger in that taking place?
Down ballot candidates.
Mm.
Because, and I want to point out too that while those numbers are devastating in terms of Democratic turnout, Republicans didn't reach what they should have either. It's just that a whole lot more than the Democrats did, because I think not even 5% of the vote, 6% of the vote. But what you do is you take the risk of those down ballot people. If you don't go vote, then your candidates who you prefer down ballot, you're not going to vote for them as well. Because in terms of which presidential candidate, that's per choice too. But if you don't go vote, period, then your candidate's not going to
That's right.
to win, but the down ballot. And I'm sure that everybody understands that the down ballot. Okay.
So explain when you say down ballot for those who may not. That's an excellent point.
Good point.
What does that mean when you say down ballot and how it hurts those who are down ballot?
Because when you go to vote, you're gonna have your ballot, and at the top should be the presidential, and then you'll go into the Senate, congressionals. Okay, but if your local state reps or your local candidates in the November election, which you're gonna have most of them, then the ones who would do a better job for you locally, then they have a less chance if you don't go vote for them. And if you don't go vote because you're discouraged with the candidates you have on the presidential level, then you take a chance of those who could do a better job down that ballot of not being elected. So down ballot is when you start at the top, which is presidential, and go all the way down to the last and a lot of times, they could be precinct chairs, depending on where you are,
Right.
or they could be the bond elections or whatever.
Mhm.
But you need to complete the ballot and go vote.
Mhm.
First of all, go vote,
Mhm.
and then complete the ballot. Was that clear enough? Is that-
Absolutely.
I know, I'm not just saying,
Yeah, I think it was very good.
not for you, I know you understand.
Yeah, it was very good.
I was reading, well, I was watching MSNBC and I was watching Morning Joe. And they had Dr. Eddie Glaude on. Dr. Eddie Glaude is a professor and, someone who's considered to be an intellectual, black intellectual in the 21st century. And he's got a new book. And in his book, he talks about we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And I want you to share your thoughts on this. His point is, we often give our power to those who represent us in elected office, where we have power, but we have given it away. This is my point. Oftentimes, individuals, and we're talking about the upcoming legislative session, oftentimes individuals will wait for their representative to submit their bills and their priorities, as opposed to being the community or those who are represented by them saying, hey, these are things that are important to me, can you submit this bill as my representative? Talk to us about the importance of taking ownership as it relates to not just their relationship and communication, but in terms of providing insight. If I'm an educator and my state representative was a business owner, small business owner, oftentimes we think that they know everything about every subject, but they don't. Talk about how important it is for me to be able to share my expertise with those who are elected to represent me in helping to frame and shape legislation that's going to benefit our community.
That should be happening. You
But
know,
it's not, as you know.
No, I talked earlier, it depends, we need to be engaged. We need to contact our elected officials and let them hear from us, because if we're not going to, demanding that they're holding public events, if we're not going to their offices, if we're not writing them, and I hate to, and I'm going to say this, but an individual can make a difference as well. But if you take a group with you, then and that elected official sees the numbers, then that, because they can sometimes, unless you're consistent and you keep on, they can dismiss it and say this person is just speaking for one person. But you must show up. You must vote. Because, I mean, it's unheard of although they do it, but why would an elected official vote for something that's against your best interest and she represents you?
Wow.
But if they're not hearing from you, they're going to do what the donors want them to do. They're going to do what it's just a fact.
That's bone deep right there.
They're going to do what the donors, they're going to do what the lobbyists who represent the donors, and as most of you ought to know, the lobbyists craft most of these laws.
Right,
Really?
in legislation.
And they craft what their donors want to be crafted. But if your elected official is not hearing from you, and if your elected official is not hearing from you consistently, then they're going to assume that they can do what they want to. And they're going to vote the way that those donors want them to vote. That's just a fact of politics. They react to who's paying them. And I talk to these politicians all the time. And one thing that I was told too is, You know what? It's very expensive to run a campaign. Unfortunately, the average person doesn't donate. So if you're going to run a campaign, you have to get your message out. You have to get your voters out. You have to do all this. Where do you get the money from? So they're not going to anger. What is about your feeding? Yeah, they're not going to anger, but your donors, they're the ones who actually control your politicians. That's just a fact. But to answer your question,
No comment.
because you know, but you know what? There are a lot of instances where the elected official would take those donations with the donors knowing, but I'm not going to vote against my constituents. I'm not going to vote against what's best for my constituents, and that's why a number of your rural state representatives are in trouble with that voucher because they voted their district.
Right.
But that's just a fact.
Yeah.
You've got to be engaged. You must contact your elected officials, because if they never hear from you, then they're going to think you're not paying attention. And especially if you just keep voting for them.
Wow.
And then get engaged. And you know what? And those of us who, no, not me, but those of you who love the politics and want to see changes, get involved and run for some of these offices. And then a lot of times, if you are as active in that community, if you are as active in that district, then sometimes you don't need the money. You just go out and talk to them, engage them, and talk to those voters, and they will vote you in. But at this point in our political climate, the money talks.
It does. Well, do we have any questions in the audience? So we do, just raise your hand, that way I can get an assessment. Okay, all right, I see one. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to that one, and if it's others, we'll see if they have, and then I have a couple of questions. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We'll end about 8 o'clock. Okay, all right,
I
Mr.
have
Jackson.
several questions, but what got you into politics and the love of it and what you're doing today, and how can you inspire others who have similar footsteps like you to be a part of it, just like at that level where you're at?
You know, initially I think I've always been, because I remember in high school protesting and walking around the corridors, and then fortunately I was a good student. So then when I finished, the assistant principal came and said, "No, you're tired." But to get to this level, I had mentors. Do you all remember Victor Smith, who was over in NAACP?
NAACP?
He got me involved in it. And then I have a brother. My brother, Dr. Lynn Mills, he was a precinct chair in Dallas, Texas, and he was very, very active. So I was involved with people who were involved in it, and it just caught my interest. And I like people, and politics involves people. And then I understand the importance of politics. So I early on, I got involved with campaigns. So that's a good place to start, is in volunteering for a campaign or getting involved in issues. You just understand, though, it's a long process, because your first effort might not be a successful effort. But that's how I got involved in it. And then when I worked on campaigns, and so in the news department I had an assistant news director who had an idea and wanted to put a political show on, and he tapped me to do it. And so I sort of developed, and it is where it is now.
Can I ask
Oh,
one
yeah,
more thing? You talked about Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, and there's always this thing of this Texas going purple. Why is there this thing every time election season comes around that they believe Texas is going to go purple, since the Democrats have not won statewide since the 1980s?
You know what, I think that before the census, where they did the redistricting, that was a possibility.
Oh.
But now that you have the way the lines are, and I think the Republicans knew it too, because you saw some of the pullback on some of those far-right issues. But now, the way the lines are drawn, those incumbents, most of the state, most of the congressional seats, they have been drawn for Republican incumbents or Democratic incumbents. So the thinking was, and then see, remember, the state of Texas is quickly becoming more people of color are coming, but they're just not voting. So that's what made them think the influx of the different races and different thinking, and that's what made it happen. But with the last redrawing of the districts, it's not going to happen in a long time. And the only possibility could be on these statewide races, but you just don't have the heavy turnout.
Right.
Yeah, but that's what my thought was. You can't gerrymander the state. So the
Yeah.
best opportunity
That's
is statewide.
And that's why I said that U.S. Senate race in terms of getting a person of color in there. Because I wouldn't care who it was, or she was, but it would be a person of color.
But then Texas, they don't advertise elections enough to let people know there's an election going on, or it's just not enough advertisement around elections. And why? And they don't want people to know because they want the low voter turnout, and that's how they keep the state as is.
Well, you answered your own question.
So my last question.
Go ahead.
Texas has 2.9 million African Americans in this state, and we talked about those African Americans that live in these outlying areas who are not voting. And how do we get, well, Obama had brought out all these people, and now since that time period, African Americans living in the suburbs are not voting. Why is that?
Well, some of them are.
Some of them are. I'm not gonna paint my brush to sell.
I'll go back to education and not educating that you need to vote, because a lot of them understand the concept, but we're emotional voters. You have to give us a reason to go to the polls.
Right.
And I go back to the education, to the outreach, to the efforts. It benefits some not to have high turnout because it keeps them in power. So it's just going to take education and interest and the desire to get people to the polls. And it takes upon us too, because we need to be asking. We need to be asking, excuse me, what's going on. But I'll go back to Channel 8, well, not Channel 8, but media. Now, we have our leaders now in news department, whatever, they're pro-politics. So they allow us to do more politics, but we have covered certain races during my time at the Channel 8, and the viewership was so low. Yes, the viewership was so low that they don't want to commit to real estate. Because they don't get the viewers. Now, lately, the viewership has increased because you have impeachment of Paxton. You have certain issues going on that they have more interest in. But the interest has not been there. And then, you know, less informed people are not likely to vote. So you have the interest of suppressing that vote. And especially certain pockets like African American where we're not monolithic now. Right. But we're subject to vote in together in numbers. So it just benefits them not to educate. So we need to be educating ourselves and educating our kids in our communities.
You talked about redistricting, and I want to see how familiar you are with this.
Oh, goodness.
A little pop, I was a teacher, so it's pop quiz.
Okay.
Shelby versus Holder.
She knows.
No, tell me
The
what.
Supreme Court case that did away with pre-clearance, where before certain states, Confederate states, for lack of a better way of saying it, had to get pre-clearance from the Justice Department before they could approve certain maps. It's been 10 years. The Legal Defense Fund came to several cities in the state of Texas. They had, and Ms. Maurice West, I'm glad he's here with Paul Quinn. We hosted at Paul Quinn a discussion by the Legal Defense Fund, 10 years after Shelby versus Holder, what are the results? What are your thoughts? And what do you foresee with this current Supreme Court in terms of the protections that are still available, even though they're hanging on by a thread, through the Voting Rights Act?
I think that if you want to hold on to those kinds of rights, then you need to work at the local level. Because if you get to the Supreme Court has shown that it's not as interested in protecting those rights because they're saying it doesn't exist. And in that last ruling, they said that you cannot base decisions purely on race. See, I just didn't recognize it as Shelby. But you cannot make decisions based solely on race. And they have shown that. So if you want to hold on to your rights, then and I haven't heard anybody ask about this, the abortion issue. I thought that would have been one of the first questions, because if you look at that right, and see, it's not really an abortion right.
It's not.
That's again about how they message. Because it's not about, you have a number of people, women who are not pro-abortion, but they are pro-choice. They want to be able to make that decision for themselves. And those rights are being eroded. And which should cause everybody pause. Because it's your constitutional right to be able to control your own life. So that's something that should be really, and it's not a woman issue, it's not a man issue, it's an issue of you being able to make your own decisions. So back to Supreme Court, if those rights are going to be protected, because we're seeing a number of our rights that are being taken away. If they're going to be protected, then, and you have some bold lawmakers.
Right.
If they are, then the best place to make sure that they're held tight is your local level.
Right.
And the state of Texas is moving to taking away these rights.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
You brought up the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. They were trying to get her to retire. Your thoughts on that? And then if Trump is elected in November, do you think Clarence Thomas will retire and allow for the Supreme Court, another Trump to appoint 2 more Supreme Court justices?
You know what, it was very interesting,
You're
but.
pretty good at boy. That was a good one. It was worth it.
I don't think anybody needs to be made to make a decision that they don't want. So that's for that. But Clarence Thomas, keep in mind, he has never changed from the day that he was appointed. And he's been under a lot of pressure now because, you know, his ethics are being challenged, and he didn't show up this week or last week at work, and no explanation for it. So the speculation is that he could be sick, but he's not going anywhere. And nowhere in his history does it show that he does anything that's best for the party or that's best for whatever. Unless, and this is strictly, I'm responding, because I don't know any other, because he hasn't been in the forefront, he hasn't been headlines for a while. If he has a situation where he knows he won't last, but he's going to hold on long enough to see if Trump. But to answer you, I can't see Clarence Thomas going anywhere, and I don't think they need to force anybody to resign.
But understand the politics of it now. You know, it used to be respectability with Thurgood Marshall when he retired, and that's how we got Clarence Thomas. Now the political parties are using it as political. It's not apolitical, it's political now. Will the political parties start talking to the Supreme Court Justice now that we have a Democratic president? You need to step down, because the next 4 years we don't know who could be president. And will you be able to last even that long?
Well, they are. That's
They are.
what you
They
said.
are
They are
living longer.
talking to her. But,
And I don't know the
there are too many
age.
and there are too many questions because I'm not, if she is ill, what kind of illness? That's just a question that I haven't put a lot of thought to because I can't see it happening. And also, they only have, 7, 8 months before a new president would come in. And look at what they did with Obama. Where he had an opportunity to appoint, they wouldn't even bring it up.
11 months.
Totally politics. But it's a political entity. So that's what you expect, politics. And then you expect those who are in control to win whatever they want to win. And the rumblings of having her to resign, that's probably has been going on maybe about the last, couple of months or 2 or 3 months. So I don't know if it has taken any legs or not.
It has. She said she's not going. But you got a Democratic president, senators ran. This next election, you never know who could be over the Senate.
That's true.
And you never know who could be the next president.
That's
So
true.
that's why they look at it.
But that person may last to the next president. So.
You're right about it.
Yeah.
I need their health care.
But I haven't given that a whole lot of thought. Because I definitely don't think Clarence Thomas. And remember, he has just come into the headlines of this ethics. You know, but they all do it. That's why they don't have any policies against doing it.
No one amongst thieves, I believe that right there. Well, this has been
Yes.
a truly hour of power
Yes.
and political empowerment. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
And you coming back, right?
All you have to do is invite me. All you have to do is invite me.
And so, I'm glad you said that. So what I would like to do, and I'll discuss it with the leadership team, and being is our voter education coordinator for Our Voters, Our Voice. And what I may do is just have you to facilitate the next discussion. So what I would like to do, if the leadership team agrees, and we're streaming live, so they better not say no. I would like to have you to come back after the November election. And then we can talk about the results, what the perception was, and what the reality is.
It's gonna be an interesting one. Because
Yeah,
I already have my ideas on it, but,
I do too.
oh, no, not in this setting. But not only not in this setting, but I'm not forecasting anything at this point, but the trends. You know, there are trends that I've learned to watch. And, but not, let's talk after the election.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I'll say, well, you know, that was my trend.
Right. So thank you again. Thank you here, those who are here in the audience. Was this a treat?
Yes.
Yes.
Education.
I'm so glad
Awesome.
you accepted. And Brother CW, thank you so much.
Happy to
because
be here.
We know once this hits, the viewership on this is going to be probably the highest of anything that you recorded that we've done. So thank you for being here. State Rep-elect Davis, thank you for picking up where Sister Candace left off. And everyone, make sure, early voting starts on Monday. Early voting starts on Monday. Early voting starts Monday. Make sure, not only do you go vote, but take someone with you to go and vote. We have to show that our voice is our vote,
Yes.
and we want to yell and scream.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll be back next month. Same bad time, same bad channel, same bad location.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for inviting me. You know, I love talking about what I do.
All right.